Hey, life groups. I hope you're having a meaningful time together already this week. As far as our church community's kind of journey and conversation these days, we're just using 3 weeks in February here to go through this series that we're calling Our Journey Together, where we're talking about what the spiritual journey often looks like, what kind of stages and steps it has in our lives and in our life of faith. And we've been leaning on this particular book. It's a discipleship book called The Critical Journey, which outlines 6 common stages of faith that can be kind of cyclical and winding and overlapping in our lives. But many of us in our community and in our leadership have found it very helpful over the years to help kind of keep guiding us along in our life of faith and following Jesus. And this particular week, on week 1, we kind of reflected on or were taught what all the stages represent. And so I did a bit of a review of that this week, or you could catch either of those messages if you want kind of the full review of that. But this week I zoomed in on what it's like to be on the journey together. And that not only do we find ourselves each at individual and unique stages of faith, but because we're part of a community, and because the spiritual journey with Jesus kind of assumes community, we're reading from 1 Corinthians 12, where Paul talks about the body of Christ, this inseparable and interdependent entity that is the church. Because we're kind of on a journey together, we can also find ourselves at a collective stage or a shared stage together. And that then kind of impacts and overlaps with our own spiritual journeys. So some of the passages from 1 Corinthians 12 are ones you can read and reflect on together and think about this concept of our journeys needing to sort of intertwine. But then I had also shared in the message about how in our story at Southridge and kind of our journey over the decades as a church, I think we've kind of moved through some of these home stages and kind of what we've emphasized in different seasons of our church. That about 30 years ago, when we had a leadership, generational transfer of leadership, we found ourselves in a bit of a fresh recognition of God phase, just partly because there was a variety of new people coming to our church who were having their own awakening to God and an awakening to following Jesus that really defined a stage for our church. I think that sort of drove us into a life of discipleship stage, a life of learning with lots of groups and studies and discipleship track classes that we had an era of that kind of was also an overlapping extended phase. And then I think a significant sort of home stage for us as a church has been what Janet Hagberg and Robert Gulick describe as the productive life, where we're trying to be active, to serve, to make a difference, to be involved, to be invested in what God is up to in our church. And that's really, that was part of what had us relocate from West St. Catharines, closer to the downtown core of St. Catharines, to make a difference closer to our city. It's part of what drove us to become multi-site, to regionalize our community and have a greater impact across the region. And really, it's at the heart of our anchor causes of justice and compassion, where we seek to serve and make a real and tangible difference in the world. But as we've kind of had some eras of those stages in our church, I then had also shared in this week's message how I think in the last 5 to 10 years, for a variety of factors, we've kind of found ourselves moving into the journey inward as a church, which is a time of some reassessment and reflection, recognizing some of the hurts along the way that need attention and need healing, and that this season requires a slow and steady pace to let God sort of do all of his work among us. And You may have felt some of that. Again, if you listen to the message, people can comment on kind of what your experience has been. But the reality is, if we're in this sort of collective journey inward, it also has an impact on your journey and what your experience of our community is. So that's essentially the conversation this week. Use the Conversation Starters Guide to process some of these questions. And ultimately, I think the point of this series and the point of the journey is to keep considering, what is Jesus inviting us to next in our own personal next step? And how is Jesus inviting us to take that step together as a community, as a church, as the body of Christ, knowing the ultimate aim and goal of our lives and our faith is to grow in the life of love of Jesus, That's the heartbeat. That's the spirit. You could read from 1 Corinthians 13, 4-7, if you want to reflect on some of those life of love characteristics. And I am hoping and praying that you can really be inspired to keep growing in that together this week as we all take another step on our spiritual journey. Have a great time.